Good morning, Michigan. A very pleasant election day to you. It's Michael Patrick Shields, heard all across the state of Michigan. Going straight to Congressman Mike Rogers, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, the Republican from Brighton, who's on the other end of our line this morning. Good morning to you.
Michael, it's always good to hear your voice.
Thank you very much. I don't know where to begin, but first of all, I wanted to ask you when you knew about this sort of $1 million hideout that Osama bin Laden was living in.
I was briefed within probably 2 days of me taking over as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and they brought me in, and at that time they had some modeling done of the compound and walked through what we had and what we needed to know, and at that time they just weren't sure they had enough to say it was Osama bin Laden there. So it was back in January.
How did this operation sounds unbelievable? 4 helicopters, 24 Navy SEALs went in there. Can you tell us exactly what happened? I understand the president was watching on some sort of video feed. Were you watching that feed too?
I was not watching live. Unfortunately, I was off on doing something else, and I wasn't close enough to see the feed. But or in a proximity where I could see the feed. It was a kind of a Hollywood type operation where they had to go a long way into country, try to get undetected, land, get into a pretty fortified compound. And I'll tell you, the compound was built and designed to thwart raids just like the ones that they did. There were blockades on each level of there's a small building there that had 3 stories, and there was blockades, so they had to get through these blockades to get to each level of the house, if you will, to get up to the 3rd floor where Osama bin Laden was. And of course there was gunfire getting into the compound, and then gunfire on each floor getting up to Osama bin Laden. They did just a masterful job. And the great news is not one casualty, not one United States casualty.
Even with the helicopter crash, I mean, that's unbelievable and very, very, very impressive. And there must have been lots of rehearsals leading up to this, I'm guessing, right?
There was some training, yes. There's certainly some training involved, but my understanding is when the brief was given to the folks who got this assignment, what it would be, after they were, you're kidding me, right? For a few minutes, they just broke out in cheers. So here's some pretty brave folks. They know they're going to do a very dangerous, likely shootout kind of mission, but they knew they were going to get Osama bin Laden. They were cheering pretty loudly.
And we're never going to know who they are, right?
Well, it's the way it's supposed to work, but this is, time. I'm sure time will allow that to happen, but the way it needs to work now is that they really should have their identities concealed.
For their own safety and the safety of their families, I would think.
Just for that, but they're also going to be used in other operations, and they'll be doing other things, and it's just you don't want all of that exposed.
Did we get any information, was anybody taken alive that knows a lot? Were there laptops? Was there any intelligence information gathered from that bunker too?
Well, what I could tell you is it's a crime scene, really, and so there's lots of evidence at a crime scene, and anything that would be swooped up in a crime scene was swooped up there. So I have a feeling, let's just say I'm very excited about the prospects of what we found there.
Pakistan's president denies that they were harboring bin Laden. Could they really have not known he was there?
Well, it's a town. It's bigger than Lansing. It's about 120,000 people. It is possible that he could have been there, and they don't. It was close to one of their ISI, their intelligence service facilities. About a mile away was their version of West Point for their officers in their military. I don't know. It's possible that they didn't know, but they had to know something was going on. They certainly weren't very curious about this big $1 million mansion, if you will, built in the city, and there's no connectivity, none, zero. They didn't run anything to it. It had its own self-contained compound. Burned their own trash. I mean, it would seem to me it would raise some flags, but their culture is a little bit different than ours. But we're going to ask some hard questions we need to know, mainly for the reason, how far is their ISI penetrated? We know it is. Now we just got to figure out how high up it goes.
There were some pictures surfacing on the internet of a dead Osama bin Laden. I understand those are all fakes, but there are pictures of the dead Osama bin Laden. The U.S. has these shots, and will you ever release them?
Well, we're talking about it. I've seen the pictures. I looked at the DNA sampling and for my own verification, the tests themselves. It's a 99% probability that it's him. You look at the picture; it's clearly him. I think there's some debate now, and I'm engaged in that debate as well. As if you do it, how do you do? You don't want to inflame parts of the world where we have troops who are trying to win folks' hearts and minds, and where they're engaged in combat operations like Afghanistan and other places. So we're working through that. I do believe that at some point they will be released to try to, I think, take away the naysayers who say there's no body, there's no X, there's no Y. But it was, I think it was done appropriately well. We were consulted throughout the whole process. They gave him a Muslim burial at sea.
Do you know where?
I don't think they're disclosing where.
Okay, it's deep, though.
I'm sure that probably will come out, but I don't think they're disclosing it quite yet.
And did they drop him from like 700 feet from some helicopter, or slide him off a boat?
They slid him off the boat, just like you would see in the movies, the way they would do a burial at sea.
Wow, that was fast, huh?
Yeah, and again, you don't want him. If he was in a physical location, you can imagine the trouble that Bruce, including a shrine where people, do some sort of a mecca to the shrine to pay respects, and it was not healthy, and so we needed to get that done and then move on.
Do you wish, to some degree, we would have taken him alive?
Could we or should we?
Should we have?
I think the folks on the ground acted exactly appropriate. Remember, there was something went a little bit wrong in the beginning of that raid that resulted in the helicopter crashing, and so it didn't go down the way it was designed.
I see. And
so you can imagine somebody who is absolutely hypersensitive, and the way they operated in that facility was to protect themselves. So when that happened, that made a lot of noise.
Oh. And
so when they went into the compound, they started receiving fire immediately.
Yeah.
So it was, I think they just acted completely appropriately.
And he shoved one of his wives in front of him as a human shield. That's pretty brave of a pretty macho of a guy, and that didn't work too good. When we come back, if you can stay with us just a couple seconds more, I have another question right after the break. We'll get right to it and get you on your way, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That is Congressman Mike Rogers, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. 3 minutes, we'll be back with him and more of your Election Day Tuesday. It's Michael Patrick Shields.